Hello friends, let's start with Xbox and Netflix. According to GameSpot and earlier reports, Xbox has been exploring ways to give Game Pass more value as prices go up. And one option they've reportedly talked through is some kind of joint subscription with Netflix. Nothing official yet though. Netflix co-CEO Greg Peters said they've only been kicking ideas around. And both sides are still trying to figure out whether a bundle like that would actually make sense for everyone involved. Of course, the streaming giant is not the only option, and Xbox has been looking for other third-party services to bolster its value for some time already. And honestly, the big question here is who actually benefits more. Netflix already has around 325 million paid subscribers, which is quite massive. Game Pass, on the other hand, is obviously much smaller by comparison. While we don't know the precise number of people subscribed to Game Pass, in 2024 the service had around 34 million subscribers. So for the sake of argument, let's say it's 40. This means that by any estimation, Netflix doesn't actually need Game Pass to grow. So if this deal happens, it feels like Xbox would gain a lot more than Netflix would. Tying Game Pass to a service people already use every day could make the price feel easier to justify, and maybe help reduce cancellations too. My guess is the holdup comes down to two things. First, revenue split, because Netflix is obviously going to want a strong cut. And second, what exactly does Netflix get out of all this? Unless Xbox finds a way to bring games directly into Netflix's ecosystem somehow, it's hard to see any immediate upside for them. So yeah, interesting idea, but I'm not shocked nothing has been announced yet. What do you think? Would you actually pay for a Netflix plus Game Pass bundle, or the deal is still not that sweet? Now, Fortnite might still be one of the biggest games on the planet, but it sounds like things aren't as untouchable as they used to be. The engagement seems to be going down, or at least that's what Team Sweeney said recently after announcing that the company laid off over 1,000 employees. The company's CEO said Epic has been dealing with a mix of broader industry problems and some issues specific to Fortnite itself. On a wider side, he mentioned slower growth, weaker consumer spending, and tougher economics overall, which is a fair assessment of the industry. But he also admitted Epic has had trouble consistently capturing the same Fortnite magic every season. And he said the company has been investing heavily in long-term changes that are still early in paying off, probably referring to Fortnite Mobile and all the legal fees they had to pay. He also made a point of saying these layoffs were not AI related, which tells you just how common that assumption has become lately. According to Sweeney, the layoffs, along with over 500 million in cost savings from contracting, marketing, and unfilled roles, should help put Epic on more stable ground. All in all, it looks like the era of endless expansion around Fortnite is over. The game is aging and entering a mature life service phase, and that means Epic has to think more about retention, monetization, efficiency, and long-term sustainability rather than just constant scale. And that should be a warning sign for the rest of the industry too, because if even Fortnite is starting to feel the pressure, that tells you just how brutal the competition for attention has become. Crimson Desert was already getting people talking, and now there is another controversy on top of everything else: AI-generated assets. Not long after launch, players started noticing some images in the game that look suspiciously AI-made. That quickly turned into a bigger issue because Pearl Abyss hadn't disclosed any AI use at all, which many people argued they should have done under Steam guidelines in the first place. Eventually, the studio responded with a statement on X. They said that during the development, some 2D visual props were made during early experimentation, using generative AI tools. The idea was to explore tone and atmosphere more quickly in the early stages, but unfortunately some of those assets ended up making it to the final game. Pearl Abyss apologized, said they should have disclosed it earlier, and promised to replace the affected content. What they didn't say though is whether they plan to keep using AI in development going forward. Some people said those assets needed to be removed immediately because they break immersion and undermine the game's quality. Others basically shrugged it off and said this is the future anyway, so why act surprised? So now we're back to the bigger question: is any use of AI a deal breaker in a premium game? Because for some players, disclosure is the real issue. For others, the issue is that it was there at all. What do you think? Also, quick thing, if you don't know who I am, my name is Alex, I'm a game producer, and I'm here to help you get caught up on everything that's going on in the video game industry. Speaking of AI, Capcom has now made its position a bit clearer too. Unlike some companies that stay vague or avoid the subject completely, the big publisher said it does want to use AI in development, just not for in-game content. According to Insider Gaming, in recent investor Q&A, the company said it does not use generative AI for actual game content, but it is actively looking into technologies that can improve efficiency and productivity during development. And honestly, that's becoming a pretty common stance. A lot of companies don't want to reject AI outright, but they also don't want the backlash that comes with using it in anything players can directly see. That said, Capcom's statement still leaves some room for interpretation. It doesn't clearly rule out using generative AI for things like ideation or concept work behind the scenes, a thing that Larian's CEO got grilled over quite a bit recently. So really, this feels less like a bold new policy and more like Capcom joining the growing list of studios saying, yeah, we'll use the tools, just not in a way that becomes a PR problem. Still, they'll need to be careful, because as we've just seen with Crimson Desert, even one questionable asset can turn into a big controversy very quickly. Have you ever finished a huge RPG and then just felt weirdly empty after? Like you've spent dozens of hours in this world with these characters and then suddenly it's just over. Apparently that feeling has a name: post-game depression. A recent study from the Warsaw School of Social Psychology looked into it and found that this sense of emptiness after finishing a deeply immersive game is very real. The study was based on two groups of players, 373 people in total, most of whom played very regularly, and it found that RPGs triggered this feeling more strongly than other genres in the data. Which honestly makes sense. The more immersive the game, the harder it can hit when it ends. And from a development perspective, that's actually really interesting. It suggests that endings matter a lot more than studios sometimes treat them. The way players feel when the credits roll can affect everything, from sequel hype to word of mouth to how attached they stay to the franchise overall. So yeah, the ending of a game probably shouldn't be treated like an afterthought. Have you ever had this feeling after finishing a game? Because I definitely have. And we're back to Sony shutting down studios. This time on the chopping block is Dark Outlaw Games. According to Jason Schreier from Bloomberg, the studio, which was only formed last year by former Call of Duty lead Jason Blundell, has already been shut down. On top of that, PlayStation is also making more cuts in mobile development, with around 50 people reportedly affected. Sony confirms the cuts in a statement using the usual corporate language about strategic adjustments and long-term sustainability and whatever, but without giving much detail beyond that. And it is the second studio closed by Sony in so many months. What makes this even crazier is that this is now a second time a Jason Blundell project has been killed under PlayStation. Back in 2024, the project he was working on with Deviation Games met the same fate. And honestly, it's hard not to look at this and ask what the plan even was. Did Sony expect something massive to materialize in a year? Did they hate the direction that much? Or is it just another sign of how impatient and unstable things have become? Because from the outside, it sure looks like it. And to wrap things up, earlier this week we talked about Ubisoft shutting down Red Storm Entertainment, and the more details come out, the rougher this whole thing looks. According to Insider Gaming, Red Storm had at least 10 different projects in the works before the shutdown. That included seasonal content for Siege, work on Beyond Good and Evil 2, a smaller Rainbow Six project called Slice and Dice, concepts for The Division 3, and more. So this doesn't look like a case of the studio sitting around doing nothing. If anything, it sounds like Red Storm was useful across a lot of different areas. The problem seems to be that the utility alone isn't enough anymore, because in the current climate, if you are not leading a major money-printing franchise, or running an incredibly efficient pipeline, or attached to something that company sees as a top priority, you're in an incredibly vulnerable state. And that's kind of the brutal reality now. Being valuable isn't always enough. If you're not seen as essential, you can still be cut. And that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know in the comments what do you think about a potential Netflix and Game Pass bundle. What is your stance on Gen AI? Or if you ever experienced the so-called post-game depression. As usual, if you want to know more, all links are down below. And of course, clicking the like button helps this channel a lot, and as a freshly minted content creator, I highly appreciate it. Thank you for making it this far, and with that, Alex is signing off for today. Cheers!